What if dreams had the same function as escapism? Let me explain. First of all, we define what a dream actually is. Second of all, we define what escapism actually is. And third of all, we define how they then connect together and what the similarities actually are. First, let's define what a dream actually is. That's not the easiest thing ever, but usually, if we refer to something as a dream, it's something that happened at night during a phase in which the mind was awake, in which also the part of our mind or our brain that we cannot really access simulated a reality for us that was so close to the real reality we usually refer to as the real reality, being the reality we experience when in an awakened state. And in this state, when the mind creates the simulated reality for us without any not extrinsic, but external stimuli, but just creating these or replacing the external stimuli with internal stimuli, then we often fail to realize that the dream world actually is a dream. Unless we realize, then this is called the lucid dream, because then you actually have access to the same mind, kind of, as in the awakened state. So you realize that the dream, the simulated reality you live in during the dream is not real. And therefore you can actually kind of influence this reality. You can make things disappear. You can live wherever you want. You can do the things you always wanted to do. Because you can now access part of this virtual machine of your mind that is creating the dream. Now, second of all, escapism is usually the attempt to escape the reality you experience and have to face day in and day out in an awakened state. Why? Because this reality just might not appeal to you, because the amount of problems you need to solve versus the time you have or the mental capacity to solve these problems just might not meet each other ideally, and therefore you just might maybe tend to procrastinate on these things. You just tend to not like them. Now, escapism can have very different, not methods, but much more. Basically, there's the concept of escapism, and now you can describe different things people do as escapism. If you want to watch a movie because you don't want to deal with the normal problems, that's kind of escapism. If you read a book about a bizarre world where there is this one Harry Potter that is the chosen one, and he is the good one, and there is also the evil one, and he has to defeat the evil one in order to establish a nice world again, then this is also kind of escapism. If you then watch a movie about this whole world and you are still intrigued with this whole world, then this could also be called escapism. If you talk about very important things all the time but fail to deal with the everyday life, like talking about philosophy for hours and hours, then this just also might be escapism. Basically, escapism is everything you try to do, or you do subconsciously or consciously, to avoid the reality you would otherwise have to face. And you know you have to face, because sometimes there are things you just cannot change, and if you cannot change them, you still can escape them. Now, putting these two things together, escapism and dreams, and how similar they are to each other, is something that came to my mind after having remembered dreams again and again and again. In the past, I tried to induce lucid dreams in myself. This basically means that I try to become awake while dreaming, which is possible and which can be used for your own benefit. For example, living for a certain amount of your time you live on this earth, awake in another world, you can entirely create on your own. And since many of us tend to sleep a fourth or a third of our total time, this could be an entirely different world to experience. Now, Of course, this is also already an escapist tendency, you could say, but at the same time, it's something that is inherently with us already. The dream is nothing we have created. It's something our mind creates for us. And the question is why? And here is where this idea hit me a few days ago, maybe already weeks ago. What if we need this escapism in order to actually deal with the problems? It's similar to when you actually bought the sixth Harry Potter book and then you just for 2 days did nothing else than indulging in an entirely different world, completely forgetting about your own sense of self, about your own identity, about sleeping, about eating, about anything. Not anything, but about many things. So now, this escapism is still there. It is there whenever we indulge in something that is not really dealing with our problems. We could deal with our problems, and of course there is some point in time where you could just quit dealing with the problems and you actually have to relax. The question is then, to which extent or to which proportion do you spend time relaxing versus, and is it justified or is it just escapism? Now, this idea now hit me. What I wanted to explain with my story of lucid dreaming is the fact that I often can remember quite vividly what I dreamt. This is something, this is just a skill you can train, and the better you become at the scale, the better you tend to, or the more likely it tends to be that you indeed can become lucid while dreaming, or can do lucid dreaming or become awake while dreaming, which actually happened for me a few times, but not in a rate that I would say is enough, I guess. So now, the question is, the essential question that comes out of all of this, if evolution and all the process that is evolution, the biological evolution, actually has created a part of our mind that is simulating a reality every time we sleep. And there's also obviously the question, why do we even sleep? I mean, there are different theories, but a solid explanation still is not out there. All the theories, like getting rest, basically defragmenting the brain, so deleting all the stuff we don't need anymore in the future, and also organizing all the stuff in our brain from the day before. What if the dream itself also served a very similar process, basically recreation? What if we now took this idea and we actually applied it? We actually thought about it. What if escapism is something we actually need? Therefore, it's not only something we do when we are awake, but we also do whenever we are in a REM sleep state, whenever we actually are dreaming. Whenever our mind is awake, and whether sometimes we realize that we are awake or not doesn't really matter, still our mind indulges our conscious self in these realities that are not real, and these realities that sometimes may take cues from the real reality the day before, and often, at least in my experience, might just have a certain recency bias implied in the dream itself, in the story, in the structure of the dream itself. Then we would see, maybe, and we would have another theory for explaining the dream, and also why we also drawn to escapism in real life, because nature or evolution already implemented this escapism into us. And every single night we escape in these foreign realities that are created just for our conscious self.